The views expressed in this interview are those of the individuals and do not reflect the official policy or position of the U.S. government, the Department of Defense, the U.S. Navy, or the Naval Postgraduate School. Welcome to the Trident Room, brewer of stout conversation, unfiltered and on tap. On today's episode, host Lieutenant Commander Colleen Wilmington sits down with two Shoemaker Scholars, Student Naval Aviator Ensign Rogers and Ensign Casey, to discuss their journey in the Naval Undersea Warfare Master's Degree Program.
Welcome back to the Trident Room podcast team. This is Lieutenant Commander Colleen Wilmington, and we're doing an episode today for the Academic Arsenal, focusing on some of the scholars who are here at NPS, specifically the Shoemaker Scholars. And these are naval aviators who are awaiting flight school and are going through a one-year thesis program, permitting them to use the time in between flight school and their undergraduate degrees to keep their minds sharp and take some of their expertise back to their next command. This has been a program at NPS that's been expanded from 10 to 50 quotas and is available to any new student naval aviator. So with us today, I have Ensign Dutton Rogers and Ensign Grace Casey. Would you guys introduce yourselves? Tell me where you're from, why you joined the Navy, and how you ended up at NPS.
So I'm Dutton Rogers from Sandpoint, Idaho, a little town up north. Joined the Navy because it was a way to get out of town. Got me a college education for free and a job after graduation. At the time, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do upon commissioning, but when looking at the different services, the Navy had the best options overall. So I went with the Navy, and here I am now.
I'm Grace Casey. I'm from Brunswick, Maine. My dad actually went to West Point, which I know is shameful, but he did, and his service in the military, and both my grandfathers as well, some of my cousins. Our family does have a tradition of military service, and that was something that was important to me, something I respected about them and about our family. And so as I got into learning about the service academies, learning about Naval Academy, the opportunities post-graduation, I think, are more broad coming out of Naval Academy than the sister academies. So that was one of the reasons I chose it. And I really wanted to fly. I knew that going in, and I was lucky enough to make that dream come closer to happening. I'm heading off to flight school after this. So the Naval Academy is a really great way to pursue that dream.
Did you have to submit anything in order to come to NPS, or one of your intermediate stops that, hey, you're going to go and you're going to do this program while we're waiting for a seat to open?
The Shoemaker Scholarship in its current form is pretty new this year. Previous years, it had 6 or 8 or 10 students who were all aeronautical engineering students, which, as I understand, is a much more rigorous and competitive process. There's been a lot of backups in Pensacola over the last few years. COVID had a big impact there, and they're still working through them. And so the admiral in charge of Sinatra down there decided to send a bunch more students here. So it was a pretty simple process. It was not a very competitive process. They had about 50 spots for the academy, and I think 50 people applied. We filled out a Google form, sent in our screenshot of our grades, and just basically ranked our preferences on what kind of program. So they told us which programs we were eligible for. There were about 8 of them. Having done oceanography in undergrad, it was kind of a no-brainer to do oceanography here.
Yeah, pretty straightforward. And there are also ROTC students here on Shoemaker Scholarship as well. I think there's about 30 of them, and maybe 40 or 50 Naval Academy Shoemaker Scholars. So I think in total, there's about 70 of us.
So I've had the honor of being in classes and doing some experiments with you guys. And I know from at least my point of view, y'all are extremely smart and kind of overwhelming sometimes. Like, whoo, are we up to par with you guys coming from the fleet? Not. But you guys, you're coming from your undergraduate and in line with the Shoemaker Scholarship mission. It's keeping your mind smart, using some of that information that you've already learned in your undergraduate. My undergraduate degree is in English. Everything that I know about oceanography, I've learned from the fleet. All of the equations, we don't learn a lot of those in the fleet. We learn the tactical decision aids and how to put the information into those. At NPS, we're learning all of the math behind, the science behind, and how to then apply that, how that gets into those TDAs. So you said both of you were oceanography majors, and the USW program here at NPS is a subset of the oceanography program. How do you think that you will bring, to include your undergraduate degree, but all of that oceanography information to naval aviation? Is that part of what platform you're putting in for? Or is it just going to be, hey, I've got an undergraduate and a master's in oceanography?
So I would say direct applicability, we're not going to become METOC officers unless something happens, but we're headed off to become pilots. So I think the most applicable thing is understanding weather really is a big leg up in flight school and in being a pilot. Understanding weather systems, winds, dangers, what is considered safe to fly in, and understanding why those things exist actually is really helpful. So I think that is something I'll carry over and be grateful for having. The specific oceanography knowledge, if I say become a P8 pilot or a helo pilot that's involved with sonar acoustics, definitely that will be highly applicable. I will definitely be using what I'm learning here. If I don't end up flying those platforms, I think still having that knowledge, like cross-community knowledge, is super valuable and makes you really a better warfighter. Because if you just know more of what's going on with your teammates in general, I think you're a better teammate yourself because you can interact more efficiently with them.
Yeah, pretty much the same thing. The USW program is very much geared towards future submarine officers. I don't think they've had many or any pilots come through their program in the last few years. And so we just kind of roll with it, learn more about the undersea domain and what we can about submarine warfare specifically, but also broader the ocean and its mechanics. And obviously, we're part of the Navy, so it's always good to know more about the ocean.
And since you came directly from your undergraduate and you haven't been out in the fleet, and especially aviators in a primarily submarine program, how are you looking into whether or not your theses have fleet relevance? And how did you select them? And because this is a part of the Academic Arsenal series, we really want to know like how kind of that process came about and what interested you about your thesis. And so feel free to expand upon the work that you're doing for your thesis.
Yeah, so kind of big picture, like you mentioned with your undergrad in English, you came here and you really had to get a big basis in oceanography and physics and the mechanics of how the ocean works. We were able to really leverage that on the way in. So your program, it seems really short and daunting, but all of these courses that a normal METOC officer going through oceanography needs to take, we've already taken that and have a lot of foundation in that. So we're able to jump right in. Within the first couple weeks we're here, all four of us here, we went around to each professor and basically one-on-one met with them and said, hey, what are you working on? What projects you got? And I've got 1 year to get a thesis done. I've done this in the past because we've all done little bits of research in the past of our bachelor's degree, just seeing kind of what projects they had active and ongoing and where they had funding to work on stuff or areas that they maybe wanted to work on, but didn't have the bandwidth or time to do it. So that's kind of how my project came about. I'm working with Dr. Mara Orscannon on turbidity in nearshore ocean environments. And there's a question that came up with mine warfare experts over in 7th Fleet trying to work on mine countermeasures, detection, and neutralization of mines. And their biggest problem facing them was turbidity, which is basically just water visibility. Dr. Orscannon, she wanted to work on this, didn't really have a lot of time, but was like, hey, you can take on this project. And so there was a sort of a groundwork of what needed to be done and the questions we're going to ask, just someone needed to do it. So that's how I went into my thesis and picked that up.
Mine, similar. We arrived and pretty quickly were told that we needed to find a thesis advisor and find a thesis, and you're already 2 months behind, so hit the ground running. That's pretty much what we were told word for word. So I think in the first 2 weeks, went around to different professors, sort of shopped almost, asked them, what are you working in? What is your focus with your research? Do you have any active projects you're doing? Do you have space for a new student? Do you have space for a 1-year student? So I'm working with Dr. Jamie McMahon, and I'm working under the ROXY program, which is a Rocky Shorelines ONR-funded project to research all sorts of different things about rocky shorelines because they're an understudied area of our ocean. And specifically, my work is looking at nonlinear wave transformations across these rocky shorelines. Is something that's been studied a lot more in shallow or sandy, gently sloping environments, but rocky hasn't really been studied. And that is important since something on the order of 3/4 of our world's shores are rocky. So to not understand 75% of what we've got seems like a real problem. So I'm excited to work with him. I'm using data that was collected in 2023, so prior to me being here, I'm not doing any of the field work, but I'm doing a lot, or all, I should say, of the data processing, data analysis, putting together this picture, and understanding what this new information is telling us about the shorelines.
And for our non-military listeners, ONR is the Office of Naval Research, and they do a lot of the funding of projects here at NPS. And so for your day-to-day work here at NPS, going through the data processing or doing the field work and going out, you have the opportunity to interact on a fairly peer-to-peer basis with a lot of mid-career officers who aren't necessarily in your career pipelines. I think, myself, my opinion, and obviously I think NPS thinks the same, that your fresh view is vital in keeping a lot of areas relevant or bringing a new idea to the table. So how do you guys make your voices heard? And are you keeping an eye out for out-of-community mentors?
Just the interactions we get day to day, I think, are most helpful. Just asking little questions here and there. Definitely was a bit of a shift, a sort of expected shift, but entering the realm of being a naval officer from being a midshipman at the academy, or people who did ROTC too, going from our direct chain of command was a lieutenant to now being on a first name basis with 03, 04, even 05s. This has been a bit of a shift in learning how to navigate that. But it's been great being able to see people the total opposite end of what we are looking down the barrel of our junior officer time. Most of the people around, they're all out of that. And so being able to just get pieces of advice, how to conduct ourselves. There's not many aviators here for us to talk with about that, but just being able to see how to PCS, how to move, how to get good orders, how to talk to your detailer, that sorts of things. Every community works through those things, but so it's been nice to get that perspective.
I wouldn't say I personally have a mentor here, but I do learn a lot from my classmates, just listening to them discuss acronyms I've never even heard of. That does school me, that teaches me a little bit. I go to some of the Myers and Minikin briefs that are definitely more naval application focused, and sometimes those do the same thing where I really can't understand more than a few words because there's so many acronyms. But in general...
You're not alone.
Okay, that's good to hear. No, but in general, I'd say they really are giving me professional naval knowledge and historical naval knowledge, all of which is important for our career and for going back to being that better teammate, just knowing the most I can before heading to flight school and being the best fit officer I can before heading to flight school. That's one way I do it.
And we've talked a little bit about your experience in USW program and the oceanography program. What is your favorite aspect of the Shoemaker program itself? Like, what is expected of you being a scholar in that program? Do you have to go to briefs at a certain frequency, etc.?
The number one expectation is finish your thesis, right, on time and graduate. Other than that, we have not really a lot going on. We have occasional weekly Friday lectures as a Ensign cohort. But other than that, there isn't much military training going on for us, which is really nice. And looking at a lot of the lieutenants here who are all doing their JPME, kind of glad we don't have to do that right now. We have more free time to work on our thesis, but also just enjoy Monterey and everything there is here.
And just an inject, the JPME is the Joint Professional Military Education, and that is normally a requirement for mid-career officers to make that jump up to senior officers.
Like Doe was saying, we have more free time this year than we have had in the past 4 years probably put together. So sort of learning how to run our own lives has been pretty great. And being an officer is really awesome. Having freedom over yourself, over your career, freedom to learn what you're passionate about and put more energy into things that you're passionate about than maybe we had before has been really wonderful. So I've enjoyed reading more, learning more about oceanography, doing my research thoroughly, and yeah, like Dot was saying, exploring California, it's beautiful.
Yeah, and that's a really good point in developing good mental health, work-life balance to set you up for preparation in the fleet. I know for a lot of my cohort, turning off that operational mindset and getting into a studious cycle was very hard for some of us. And now you have more time on your hands. Are you using any habits from your days at USNA to help keep you ready to get back into that more operational expectation that's coming at flight school, or are you just kind of chilling?
Kind of chilling. Enjoying the semi-break that we have here because we understand we kind of get this for year off, is what it feels like to us, and then we're going to spend the next 8 or 10 years, right, at pedal to the metal. So
I will say, we learn lots of valuable skills at the Naval Academy. We're learning more valuable skills here as well, and we'll take both of those on with us into our future careers. Maybe we're not as pedal to the metal currently, but once we get to flight school, it'll be that way, and we're ready to hit the ground running and apply ourselves fully to that. I'm excited for it, yeah.
Learning to take a break is actually a really hard life skill for a lot of people. When do you guys actually graduate? Which
June of 2025.
June of this year. So what are you guys looking forward to other than flight school and joining the fleet after graduation?
I'm looking forward to finally being in the fleet. The one disadvantage of taking the Shoemaker is to push that out by another year. The Naval Academy is a great place, but the really frustrating thing is that you are in the Navy, but you're not in the Navy the entire time. Either as a freshman or sophomore, you're being told, hey, this is what the fleet is the whole time, or as a junior, senior, you're trying to figure out like what the fleet is. But nobody really knows there except for the few officers who are there to help out. It's kind of this weird nebula, weird energy there. And so it'd be nice to just finally be a part of the big Navy, which kind of feels weird to say.
Yep, I feel the same way. I think carrier-based aviation is such a keystone hallmark part of our culture and our history, and I want to carry on that tradition and be part of it too. I think it's pretty awesome.
I don't blame you. I've been on 3 carriers myself, and I love going to sea. And Grace, you mentioned it, you can use some of the oceanography that you've learned here, some of the USW, to connect on the ships and communicate, and it really raises the value that you guys bring to the fleet. Do you guys have any saved rounds that you'd like to talk about, or anything on your thesis that you wanted to thank your advisors?
Go Navy, beat Army.
Yeah, that says it all.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me today for the Trident Room podcast. And we do plan on doing some more interviews around the campus, maybe get some of the Bowman Scholars in here, Meyer program, Medican, and really expand on what are some of the programs here at NPS for the leaders who are coming into the fleet. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for joining us in the Trident Room. For more information about today's guests and topics, please visit the show notes online at nps.edu/Trident Room Podcast. The Trident Room Podcast has been brought to you by the Naval Postgraduate School Alumni Association and Foundation. For questions, comments, and suggestions, please email us at tridentroompodcasthost@nps.edu.